I mean, I did mention that I had to compensate for yesterday, so here's the second video. We're all drunk on something. Be it booze, drugs, tobacco, a million things. We're all drunk on something. We want to believe in something. Or maybe we don't believe in anything. And instead, we just need something that gets us through the motions. I fall into this camp of thinking. For the longest time, I was drunk on the idea that I one day would be accepted for who I am. But as time has passed, it has become increasingly obvious that that's just not the case. I'm an outcast. And so, the thing that for the longest time I believed I was drunk on was my creativity. My art, my drawings, my stories. But one day I would be able to share them with the world. As time passes, I do not believe that I'll be able to fulfill this dream. That it'll be relegated to nothing. That I'll be seen as a delusional fool by history. Or worse, forgotten my entirety. So, with that dream left unfulfilled, I had to develop a new addiction, something to get drunk on, something to fill that void in my heart. And that became, for a time, Geometry Dash. If you check as far down as my channel goes, you'll see a level labeled SNT. A level that I never finished. A level that, for whatever reason, I didn't feel was good enough. That no matter how hard I tried, it was never good enough to put out. And I never did. A shame, but well, when you enter a field, you have to compete with the people that are already there. And I quickly realized I was not up to snuff. The same problem that I faced with my own art. Everyone's doing digital now. I'm stuck in traditional. So I end up having these pieces that are wonderfully crafted and yet no way to really import them to anywhere besides, scanning. And as you might have perhaps figured out, I am not exactly in a situation where I can afford a new scanner. An unfortunate reality, but the longer time goes, the longer I realize that I do not have the energy to make art in the scale that I would have to in order to become recognized. It would have to become my career, everything I dedicate my life to. And I don't know if I can do that. Thus, I developed a few addictions. For a time, I wanted to be recognized by someone, and I found my kin in other outcasts. Not necessarily any of the usual groups. It was never 4chan. I am too good of a person to go there. And I never became part of the furry community. The outward sexualization and just unflinching flamboyancy of it never sat right with me. It was always too abrasive for me. And I found shelter in a small fandom, one that today seems to have mostly faded into obscurity. But there was a time where they were seen as, well, what furries are seen as today. A plague upon the world, and I was part of them. Still bear an heirloom of that time. Either as a nostalgic memory of better times, or a reminder of what I once used to be. I didn't last long in that community. They were quickly associated with less than savory attributes, and I simply couldn't stomach it anymore. So I had to find somewhere else to be. I found my home in Geometry Dash for a time, but even then, that was short-lived. Then it was Destiny, a game that had constantly been in an up and down motion, constantly getting highs and lows and defining what it could have been and what it really was. A game that I should have abandoned a long time ago, but, well, we're long past that point. Destiny 2 has really become a part of my life. Warframe was for a time, but, well, Warframe is not really a game you can play for too long. After a time, the content drought kicks in, and then you realize you can't play it forever. Destiny 2, however, is different. There's always something to chase, something to do. The things you make, the things you obtain, they fade out. Warframe has never really had that problem. If one thing stops being powerful, you probably have something else that will replace it if you play for long enough. And that's the situation where I landed myself in. If crit weapons are the meta, I already had them. If status weapon were the meta, I had plenty. If hybrid weapons were the meta, I also had many, and now, with more things coming out, I just really stopped caring. Because the things that I already had, I spent just too much time playing with. Destiny never really had that problem. A hand cannon is a hand cannon. They will always be good. An SMG is an SMG. A pulse rifle is a pulse rifle. So even if there's a new one, it's not going to be drastically different and something you need to adapt to. Something that I could get behind. The meta always changed, but there was always something familiar about it. Something that felt unquestionably Destiny 2. And that is how I saw Destiny for the longest time. I still do. I found my home in Elden Ring, a game so big and so difficult I could at least boast that I basically mastered the game. That is, of course, not true. I mostly dedicated all of my time learning Malenia, and, well, it's definitely been a while. But Destiny 2 always seemed to just be there for me whenever things were rough. Through highs and lows, there was something really personable about Destiny 2 that no other game really could ever match. It earned a special place in my heart. But it wasn't the only addiction that I had. For the longest time, I've had an addiction that has caused me great shame. One that I've had to hide from the world for a long time. One that, if I really said the name of it on YouTube, well, it wouldn't really be of much help to myself because it'll absolutely land me in the naughty list of YouTube and prevent my videos from getting shown. But I'm pretty sure that someone that was part of that community that has definitely had close encounters with the furry community, who's an artist and hasn't really been able to have any significant romantic relationships over the years. It's a very evident kind of addiction, isn't it? And we've all had this. At least if you're deep enough into certain hobbies, we've all felt this. It's almost inescapable. And as much as I've tried to break away from my vices, they always come back. You can never stay in a state of. You can never stay in a state of abstinence for too long. Relapse is gonna kick in at some point. It always happens, no matter how hard you try. And when it's gone, you're just left empty because you realize how little you have. Without friends, without any significant other, my talent being overshadowed by pretty much everyone, always being above average but never excelling. You're just left with this empty feeling in your stomach. I've never been particularly great at anything. My greatest talent has always been art. And I've severely neglected it for years. Going back now seems kind of pointless. Even if I retain some of the skills, a lot of the passion is gone. A lot of what I used to believe in no longer applies. I am not as hopeful as I was back then, not as naive as I was back then. I've suffered enough humiliation and I've definitely felt stagnant for long enough that the only thing that's left for me to do is just voice it. All the hope that I used to have is gone. And truth is, the longer time passes, the harder it becomes for me to believe things will change. Of course, it's not always the case, but. Sometimes you're just in a hole so deep that the light at the end of the tunnel seems oh so dim.